got Miss Heffley here with me today. We're going to talk about how to write an IEP. My first question is, what information do you use to help you decide if a child needs an IEP?
Well, that's a committee decision. We we have to have a referral from someone, and then after that referral, we form a committee which includes a parent, their classroom teacher. Normally, with us, we have the special ed teacher, the principal, other classroom teachers. It depends, but they get together, and if they need they feel like there is a need there, then we move. But you can't do that unless you have a referral. But before that process, we have an RTI process, which the teacher goes through and tries to make accommodations and do some extra one-on-one teaching or some other things. And then when the referral comes, we say, well, these didn't work. What more can we do? So that's usually the way we do it. Now, there are instances where you do not have to RTI a child. So,
Okay, who is allowed to decide if a child needs an IEP?
well, it's always a committee decision, and the parent always has the last say. If they do not want a child served in resource room or in whatever, that's their final decision. But the committee will after an evaluation is conducted, the committee will come together. But there are guidelines that we go by when we determine whether there's an eligibility, and a lot of that is based on what the psychological evaluation, what they've made on that. Any student that needs help, even if they're not eligible for special ed, you try to find a way for those kids to get help.
Okay, does an IEP give a student extra time or easier work, or can it just give a student a different alternative to complete a task?
Okay, any of those. You as a committee will come together and look at the scores on a child, look at their needs. You determine if there needs to be modifications in their classroom. The work that you give them and the things that you work on may be easier than other, like first grade students, but you are modifying that to help to bring them up and to help address the things that they're weak in, and work extra on the things that they haven't accomplished and the goals they haven't met. So your goals are going to fit with what your grade is working on, but with modifications where you're addressing it on their level. So, they can have extra time. That's a modification that can be made. Less work if a child is slow to write. They have OT where they're not writing good, and it's really difficult for them to write. Then you may cut out some of that. You may just require a smaller amount. Spelling words could be modified. They're 10 words may be too many, so you would modify it and have 5. Even modify the words that they learn, depending on what their needs are. So yeah, you can have extra time. There could be less work as compared to others, but it's all based on an individual. IEP is individual, so you have to do that.
Do parents have to okay the process or help make the plan?
Both. Like I said earlier, if they do not agree with the decision or the people in the committee, it is overall their choice. And there are avenues that if they don't agree with what you want to do, that they can go through and say, we don't want this. And so overall, it is their choice, but you try to give them, the reasoning behind what you think is best for their child. But overall, yes, they do make the decision, and they have to okay it, and they should be involved in the plan. if you're going to work with a child in special education for 30 minutes a day in reading, uh, you would want to explain to the parent why they need that, how you're going to accomplish that, and the goals. So, you would go through goals and say, they are behind in certain things. This is what we'd like to do to bring them up. And then the parents also have input. If they say, in spelling, Bobby's not doing well. Can you do something with that? Well, then we can discuss that and make some changes. So they have an active role in that.
Okay. Is there a process to qualify for an IEP, or can any student get one?
Well, the IEP is what we use in special ed as a way and means to accomplish our goals. And there has to be a deficiency, there has to be a need, and not anyone can get in as in you have to go through certain steps. You have to go through the referral, then you have to go through a testing process and by a licensed psychological tester, and then you receive his his outcome and all his information and his guidelines, and then you come together as a committee, and then you decide, yes, they are eligible for services. There are other things, but for special education and an IEP, there is a process. Now, if you have a medical condition such as seizures, autism, things like that, it's they're identified under different levels, under different things like uh, a specific learning disability, mentally challenged child, or an autistic child, or different ones. So there could be medical reasons like the seizures, or ADHD is a handicapping condition for in your IEP. So they're all varieties, and you have to meet the criteria for each one to be eligible.
What information has to be included in an IEP?
Um, well, you need in the IEP, uh, first you need the amount of time they'll be spending, whether it will be in a resource room or a self-contained classroom, whether it can be in direct instruction, which is in the regular classroom, and the special ed may come in and work with the teacher in the regular classroom, or whether it's just the indirect is you're just checking on them. They're in the classroom, and you don't pull them out, and you just monitor their grades, monitor their progress, and if they fall back and they're not doing as well, then you'll be able to decide, well, we need to move her back into the class, to the special ed, and give her some extra individualized help. So that's one thing. Another one is who provides the service. We have occupational therapy, we have physical therapy, we have speech and language, and then we have resource rooms. So it identifies that. Uh, it identifies their weaknesses and their strengths in there. Then it identifies the areas you're going to work with them, like language arts, reading or writing or math. And also, it identifies who's going to provide the services, whether it's a resource room, um, the modifications that you have. You can modify their classroom, and they're in the classroom and in special ed, but mostly in the classroom. If maybe it's shorter assignments, maybe it's having the test read to them, or there's just almost anything you could think of could be a modification. And then all that goes in, and then the goals, what you want to accomplish in resource room for that child, and the objectives, just divide the goals up.
How long does an IEP follow a student?
As long as they're receiving special ed services. If you have a student that starts and receives services in kindergarten, and they get into third grade and they've matured, their reading is improved, you can decide you no longer they no longer need those services, then they're not they can be, no longer in special ed, then you would not need the IEP. But as long as they're receiving services, even speech, you have a kid that comes into kindergarten and needs speech, they can decide, after 2 years, well, we've met all our goals and objectives. They're functioning on great, they're speaking well and all that. So they will not need an IEP because they're not going to receive services.
Can you make an individualized education plan for any area, subject, or behavior?
Yes, just if it can be specific, and behaviors are one, subject areas are other. Also, you have goals as in occupational therapy, writing, and fine motor skills. And then you have physical therapy, which I didn't mention earlier, which is, we have children that have problems walking up steps and those things, and they have goals and objectives for those. Tying your shoe, just different ones. So there's all types, and there are goals for those.
Does having an IEP automatically place a student in special education classes?
If it is a special education IEP, and I think that's what we call an individual education plan. Now that IEP there may be other classes that call them IEPs, but if you have an IEP that we're talking about, it is in a special under that umbrella of the special education. And yes, you have to be in special ed to have IEPs, and they follow you through the years, through the process. Every year you have an annual review. You look at your IEP, determine if you've met goals and objectives. Do you need new ones? You've accomplished your multiplication facts. Do I need a new goal that, we're going to work on division? So those grow with the student, and hopefully they do need new goals and objectives. And then hopefully eventually they may not even need the service. So,
And for the last question, if a student improves, can the IEP plan be dropped or discontinued?
yeah, and I've talked about that. They can, they will. Not always. An IEP and a special ed may follow a child all the way through school. We have a lot of special needs children that need that extra help, but then we have SLD kids that just need, maybe because of maturity or developmental delays, so, or speech or any of those. So if a child improves, we want them to move on, and if they don't need our services, that's the best thing. So yes.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.